Hi, I'm Chad with Move for a Guitar. This lesson is from our series Music Theory for a Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to show you the most common interval shapes up to an octave. First off, download our free e-guide, Music Theory for a Guitar. It contains everything that I'm talking about in this lesson, all the charts and diagrams, as well as much more, so it'll be really useful to you. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download that. But I am working on it right now as I'm filming this lesson, so it may not be available as you're watching this lesson. And if it's not available yet, it'll say coming soon. And if you'd like to get notified when it is available, you can sign up for our mailing list and we'll send you a notification for when it is available and let you download it. And also, if you're signed up for our mailing list, you'll receive all updated versions as well. But don't worry, you don't need the e-guide to follow along with this lesson because all the charts and diagrams will be on the screen. And also, we add at least one new lesson every day, so be sure to subscribe. So this is part 3 in our series Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So in the first lesson in this series, we talked about intervals horizontally on one string. I went through all the intervals on one string up to an octave. In the last lesson, we talked about the intervals between the open strings. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about intervals again up to an octave, but this time we're going to talk about interval shapes that you get fretting notes on the fretboard. So in the first lesson, we played the intervals horizontally on one string. In this lesson, we're going to play the intervals more vertically on two separate strings. And it's really important to be able to visualize these intervals more vertically on separate strings because that's going to be really important as you're building chords and lots of stuff you do on the guitar, and it's going to help you learning music theory. So it's important to be able to visualize these vertically, not just horizontally along one string. And these shapes that I'm going to show you are the most common shapes. There's more than one way to play a lot of these, but I'm showing you the most common ones, and they're common because they're the easiest to grab typically. Other shapes would create pretty big stretches. And when I show you these, I'm going to start on the 6th string. I'm going to show you all of them starting with the 6th string, and then later in the lesson I'll show you how to move them to all the other strings. And again, just like the other lessons, we're not talking about specific notes right now. We're just talking about intervals and shapes. So don't worry about what notes these actually are. So I'm going to show you the same intervals that I showed you in the first lesson when I was showing you horizontally on one string. But like I said, in this lesson, I'm going to show you them on two separate strings, more vertically on the fretboard. So the first one we covered was a minor second, or a flat 2. And if you were just on one string, that's half a step apart. But if you were going to put those onto two separate strings so that you could grab both notes at the same time, or just so you can visualize them that way, it would look like this. If you started with your first note here, you would go down towards the floor one string, because this is your 6th string again. You'll go down towards the floor one string and then back 1, 2, 3, 4 frets. That would give you a minor second interval. And again, I'll show you this on the other string sets later in the lesson. The next interval was a major second, or just a 2, and that's a whole step apart on one string. But if you were playing them as two notes on two different strings, it would look like this. So that's taking the minor second, which was here, and moving it up half a step to right here. So that would be your major second shape. The next shape was a minor third, or a flat 3, which was a step and a half apart on one string. If you're playing that on two separate strings, it would look like this. So if you notice again, you're just taking that last one, which is a major second, which is right here, moving it up one half step. That gives you your minor third. The next interval was a major third, or a 3, and that was two whole steps on one string. If you were to play it on two separate strings, it would look like this. Again, you're just moving that note up half a step, and it gives you that shape. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize them right now as I'm talking about them. Right now, it's basically just to give you the concept and give you the idea of how they can be played on multiple strings. The next interval was a perfect 4th, or just a 4, and that was 2.5 steps apart on one string. And if you were to play a perfect 4th on two separate strings, it would look like this. Again, you're just moving that one note up half a step. And if you'll notice, a perfect 4th played on two separate strings is the same as what it was with the open strings where you had a perfect fourth, and that's just because now instead of them being the two open strings, you're just fretting them, and you could fret these anywhere, it'd still be a perfect fourth and look exactly like it looked with the open strings. The next interval is a diminished fifth, or a tritone, which is a flat 5, which is 3 whole steps on one string. That would look like this. The next one was a perfect fifth, or just a 5, and that was 3.5 steps. That would look like this. The next one was an augmented fifth, which is a sharp 5, or it can also be a minor 6, depending on the situation, or a flat 6, and that's 4 whole steps on one string. That would look like this, and here we've moved the note from 2 adjacent strings to skipping a string. So there's a string in between right now, these 2 notes, and that's just because this is a lot easier to hold, those 2 notes, than if that note was up on an adjacent string. It would be a big stretch. So that's why this second note is moved down towards the floor one string. And that's why I was saying earlier, these are the common shapes. There's more than one way to play a lot of these, but you get into more difficult stretches. The next interval is a major sixth, which is a 6, or can also be a diminished seventh in certain situations, which would be a double flat 7, and that's 4.5 steps. That would look like this. The next one is a minor seventh, or just a flat 7, and that's 5 whole steps on one string. That would look like this. The next one's a major seventh, which is 5.5 steps on one string, or just a 7, and that would look like this. And then we're to our octave, which was 6 whole steps, or 12 frets apart, and an octave is an 8, and that would look like this. So that's with all these intervals starting on the 6th string, but I'm going to show you how to move one of the intervals down through all the string sets. I'm only going to do it with one of the intervals because I think you'll understand how to do it after I show you, and it's a good exercise to try and visualize and figure it out on your own. But also all of these are in the e-guide, so you have that as a reference as well. So we're just going to take a major third interval because that's a really common interval. It's one that's used a lot. It's in major chords. This interval is played by itself a lot of times because it creates a really nice sound. So it's just a really common interval. So that's the only reason I'm starting with this. Again, they're arbitrary notes. We're not worried about the actual note names, just the interval shape. So here's the major third that I already showed you. If you were to move that down toward the floor to the 5th and 4th string, it would be the same. If you did it again, it would be the same shape. If you did it again, like I talked about in the last lesson, how the guitar is tuned between the G and the B string is a major third, and all the rest are perfect fourths. So that means whenever you hit the 2nd string, you have to move that note up half a step, which would give you this shape. So this is a major third interval shape on the 3rd and 2nd string. So it's the exact same interval, it just is a different shape because you've hit that 2nd string and you need to move up half a step. And then when you go down to the next 2 strings, the 1st and 2nd string, you need to move what's on the 2nd string up again because you've hit that 2nd string, move it up half a step, and it actually just becomes the same shape as you had before. It's the same as what you started with. So you can do that with all the intervals, just move them up, and anytime one hits the 2nd string, you just have to move it up half a step, and that's your new interval shape. And again, this is in the e-guide, so don't worry about it. You'll have that as a reference, and it'll show you how to do it with the rest of the intervals as well. So if this seemed confusing to you, or if it seemed like I moved fast through these shapes, or you're just even wondering why you need to know these shapes, again, this is something we're going to dive into in later lessons, and it'll just become clearer and clearer to you. I just wanted to start, give you an introduction to it, show you how these interval shapes lie as common shapes when you're using them on 2 different strings instead of just one string horizontally. And this is just another step towards understanding how the guitar is laid out. In the next lessons, we're going to dive even further into guitar is laid out. And again, I think by the time you've gone through these lessons, you'll have a really clear understanding of how the guitar is laid out and have a strong understanding of music theory. So just download that e-guide. It'll be a great reference for you. You'll come back to that often. And don't worry about memorizing these shapes or anything right now. Again, just move on to the next lesson and be sure to subscribe because we add at least one new lesson every day.